Welcome to CEO Interviews, a production of Gorecom, in which we take the time to speak with small cap executives about what's going on at their companies. And trust me, with XPhyto Therapeutics, there's a lot going on. With us is Hugh Rogers. He's the chairman CEO. The company trades on the CSE under XPHY, in the US under XPHYF, and for our friends in Frankfurt under 4XT. With us also, you've seen him before on our Beyond the Expert series, Lee Hughes. He's a strategic advisor to the company. For those of you new to the company, XPhyto has three divisions developing science-driven solutions to solve health issues. And more than just lip service, 2021 is a transformative year as product development programs are advancing from the lab to the clinic. So for example, XPhyto Diagnostics, they've got a rapidly and highly portable PCR diagnostic test system emerging as the only internationally recognized standard for COVID-19 testing. We know that sounds like a lot. Trust me, they're already delivering test kits for evaluation. We're going to talk about that. On the psychedelic side, they're developing industrial scale production of pharmaceutical-grade psychedelic compounds, including psilocybin and mescaline. That's to create standardized drug formulations with safe and precise dosing. That's a big deal. And finally, on their vector pharma drug delivery and clinical validation, over there, innovative drug delivery methods such as transdermal patches and even oral dissolvable films. And they've got 5 clinical studies there. So let's catch up on all of those because they're moving fast. Gents, welcome back.
Thanks so much, George. Pleasure to be back.
Pleasure to have you, Hugh, and Lee. Always, buddy. Glad to have you back.
Thanks, George. Thanks for having me.
Hugh, let's start off. Look, if most small cap companies had just one of your divisions and where you guys are at, that would be a company maker and they'd be really happy with it. But you've got 3. So let's start off first with the one that seems to be most relevant in terms of, media and what's really on people's minds. Your PCR test. People don't realize this. It's a test. It's in 20 minutes with a 5-minute detection process. That's almost unheard of. And you've shipped some product to Israel. Let's talk about that, as well as trials underway in Germany and where you're at with it.
Okay, so lots to cover there. That's right. XPhyto is a technology life science accelerator. So we're advancing a number of different programs, and first and foremost right now, taking our rapid point of care PCR test to market. So we are approved in Europe for sales, and we have news coming soon in terms of distribution and partnerships and pilot projects. But as you just mentioned, we have announced the shipment of 2,000 units to Israel. That's for the purpose of regulatory approval in Israel, looking to expand beyond Europe. So we do have we have a strong footprint in Germany. Obviously, Germany, Switzerland, Austria, the German-speaking countries would be a natural, as well as some of the other larger markets, Italy, Spain, the UK, in Europe. But certainly Israel being a leader in the management and fight against COVID-19 on the testing front, on the vaccine front, it was a natural for us, being so close to Europe, to look to that market as the next step.
Let's talk about how revolutionary it is to have a 20-minute PCR test plus 5 minutes for detection process. How big is that to the entire? Does anybody have anything close to that?
Yeah, so there's a couple of products that have come on the market that are similar, but different in their application. So where we fit in, I mean, we're really with a speed of a rapid antigen test with the accuracy of a PCR test. So for the other products that are out there, having a PCR test that's, let's say, 25 or 30 minutes, it becomes less meaningful if you're not providing results at the point of care. And the reason for that is that the standard, let's say the logistical setup is sample collection, they batch store them, they batch ship them, then they batch process them and report results. So you're usually looking at somewhere between 24 and say 72 hours to get results.
Right.
So what we're doing and the way we've designed our test, not only is the PCR processing itself extremely fast, but because it's designed for point of care, which means it's less equipment, less training required, lower laboratory standards, generally it's designed for satellite and pop-up labs. This means reporting at the point of care. So processing, everything from sample collection to processing to reporting within that sort of 30-minute window, which is a big difference. So that means, you can see some use case scenarios, like for example, mass use of, say, antigen tests. But antigen tests are, let's say, 50-50 at best in terms of sensitivity and specificity, at least in certain cases. If you have, let's say, a positive result and you want confirmation by PCR, well, our test would fit in perfectly there. If you have a negative result on an antigen test and you're symptomatic and you want confirmation, well, there's another use case. Another example would be you land at an international airport and you take your sample.
One, right?
Well, exactly. So you take your sample as soon as you're off the plane and you've got the result before you leave the airport. These are use cases where I think we have a significant advantage. It's speed and it's portability. Another example would be, let's say, pharmacies, for example, in Germany are currently permitted to collect samples. Those samples are then batch shipped and processed in a central high throughput lab. What we're doing, or what we're planning to do, and look for news soon, is the collection and processing on site in pharmacies. So we're talking 20,000 plus pharmacies in Germany as potential partners.
Wow.
It's a huge market. So, it's in some ways it's a niche product, but it's obviously, it's not going to replace either the ultra low cost antigen tests, and it's not going to replace, let's say, the ultra high throughput centralized lab processing. There's a place for all these different test products, and we see, a very large niche. I mean, the industry is so big now that, a lot of money can be made. It's a multi-billion dollar, let's say, niche for us to fit in. So it's pretty exciting as we bring these products to market.
Well, look, I know Canada is suffering badly right now from people who are flying in from all over the world who supposedly should have negative test results, and yet 5,000 people have come through in the last month in our airport. So clearly what that's telling us is guys are forging or just faking documents somewhere saying, look, my name is George and I've got a negative test. So I would think that this would be a great application where the airline's saying, listen, we don't care about what you're doing outside. You come here, you take this test, in 30 minutes, we're going to know if you're negative before we let you get on our plane. What kind of feedback are you hearing, Hugh, in terms of partners in Germany and Austria and that part of Europe? You mentioned that there are upwards of 20,000, drugstores or pharmacies in Germany. What kind of feedback are you getting from potential customers and distribution partners?
Well, there's certainly interest. I think, on the example of the pharmacies, this is an entirely new business for them. So not only is it, part of pandemic management and control, but it's an opportunity for them to expand their business beyond just sample collection. So there's an entire reimbursement model for them to generate new income. So there's a lot of interest on the pharmacy front. You can see how, let's say, schools right now in Germany, students are taking antigen tests sometimes up to twice a day, or twice a week rather. You can see how a mobile PCR confirmation would be extremely useful. Airports, as we mentioned, doctors, physicians' offices, where they could do on-site testing rather than wait 48 or 72 hours for results. If you could have them within 30 minutes, that's extremely useful. When you think about viral load, peaking within a few days, right around sort of the onset of symptoms, having the ability, let's say a pre-symptomatic or asymptomatic patient with high viral load, the ability to diagnose them properly is extremely meaningful, because the difference between 30 minutes and 72 hours is a massive window there with high viral load and highly contagious individual. So it has the potential for quite a meaningful impact in terms of either, the alternative is people stay in quarantine, which, I think some people do. You mentioned the airports, Canada in particular has, fairly stringent rules around quarantines for inbound passengers, but whether people are following that is a completely different story. So, if we can get those results in hand in minutes rather than days, you can see the potential impact.
Lee, you're famous for the amount of due diligence you do when you join companies. You don't just take on anybody and ask you to join their advisory or become a strategic advisor. You do real deep dive to make sure the company fits your standards. What are you seeing out there in terms of this test and how big and how revolutionary it may be in different markets around Europe and even around the world?
Yeah, there's certainly a growing place for it. Let's just say that. I mean, the diagnostic sector wasn't much of a sector that I had much knowledge of or interest in, to be honest with you, until getting involved with XPhyto and seeing how Hugh and his team have obviously built that vertical within the business of XPhyto. I mean, if you ask me, it's probably one of the most exciting verticals that exists within the business at the moment. You can see so much potential for it. I mean, it's interesting you guys are talking about, you know, the place for this as, you know, the world opens up. You know, you look at Australia, obviously, being Australian, and see how, I guess, pedantic they've been in relations to tourism and just even their own citizens like myself coming back and forth from the country. I mean, if you want to look at how to really lock a place down, I mean, they are an island, but look at that place down there. I mean, they have one COVID case and they literally closed the whole country down for 5 days until they contact trace the whole, you know, the whole case, I guess if you call it that. But I still know that, I mean, even a country like that has survived very well through COVID by putting really, I guess, enforced measures that you don't see anywhere else in the world. They still need to open up. They still need to survive off tourism. They still need to survive off importing and exporting. I think a lot of the cases that have come into Australia actually have all been from the ports, from ships, you know, importing and exporting produce out. So, you know, I mean, Hugh just mentioned a few examples of these situations where this can work. I mean, the list goes on. If you want to start to talk about the movement of cargo around the world as well, I mean, think about how big transport and logistics is.
Yep.
I think to be able to do that safely is a massive market. You know, have a look at some of the diagnostic. I mean, we all like to look at peers and comparables, George. You know that's our game. Have a look at some of these diagnostics companies that are down in the US that have really been just you know, little two-man shops in a lab 2 years ago, and you see, you know, the amount of financing and funding and expansion they've been able to capture because of COVID, I guess if you call it that. I see a lot of room to move with XPhyto because of the exciting verticals that it has, and I think the diagnostics one is just the flavor of the month, and obviously that's going to be the one that brings probably the current investors or shareholders
The tangible results, like the first tangible, like we got sales, you got revenue, just
that's it.
but
That's
just
it.
the tip of the iceberg. You think?
Yeah, I mean, look, I'm harassing Hugh every day myself, just wanting to know what's next. I mean, you know, like I said, you know, 3 years ago or 3.5 years ago when XPhyto was private, when I first, you know, invested into the company, who would have ever thought that it would transform into a business that it is today? You know, I don't discount the other verticals that it's in as well, with, you know, like you were mentioning before, the psychedelic sector, you know, the stuff that's going on with Vector Pharma and that business unit as well, which was what XPhyto was essentially what it was 18 months, 2 years ago. You know, it's just accelerated, and I guess you hit the nail on the head. You know, biotech or life science accelerator. The company's certainly done that and executed that in such a short period of time. And, you know, as we know, biotech investors in Canada aren't necessarily the most patient or sophisticated going around, but they're certainly learning fast. And, you know, I'm sure Hugh's got a few surprises to share with all of us, a lot more than what I know, obviously, and everyone else outside. But I guess back to your question, I just think this PCR testing environment that XPhyto has immersed itself in, I think is going to be here to stay, not just, you know, to and through getting the world back up and running post-COVID, but I think it's just going to become a process or a procedure within multiple businesses, in particularly transport and tourism.
Yeah, essentially for another couple of years for sure, at least, if not forever. Hey, Hugh, last question on this division. You delivered 2,000 tests to an Israeli distributor for clinical evaluation. That was and regulatory approval. That was in April. Any indication of how that's going so far? But more importantly, if everything goes well, because there's no reason to believe it won't, what are you looking? What's the goal with this Israeli distributor if everything goes well with those 2,000, you know, evaluation tests?
That's right. So it will be evaluated in multiple government medical clinics and settings there. So there's a few different agencies that will be reviewing this. I can't say too much about the potential, although certainly, the distributor has access to everything from Ministry of Defense to Palestinian health organizations. So it's not just Israel; it's neighboring territories. But again, this is in addition to what we're focused on in Germany. I think Germany is our best foot forward at the moment. It's sort of the next step as looking down the road. Where do we want to be? And Israel and the Middle East is certainly a market that makes sense for us. Look for in terms of the near term. Certainly look for news from Germany.
All right. Going to be a lot going on there, but congratulations on the success so far, and can't wait to see how that real translates to commercialization, because we know you're targeting sales launch in Europe for Q2, and we're right there right now. Let's hop over to the psychedelic side. You're developing an industrial scale production of pharmaceutical grade psilocybin compounds like including psilocybin and mescaline. Sorry. You've recently, the note here is psilocybin is recently designated twice as a breakthrough therapy by the US FDA to treat major depressive disorder and treatment-resistant depression. Where are you guys at with your production, and how big of a market do you think you're going after here?
That's right. So I think certainly psychedelics as a whole, I mean, this is the absolute avant-garde in terms of the next generation of mental health or mental illness related pharmaceutical ingredients. So everything from psilocybin to mescaline to DMT to, you name it. This is LSD, MDMA. There's a lot of opportunities out there. What we're focusing on is, and this is something learned from the cannabis industry, is really starting at the foundation, which is the production of pharmaceutical grade ingredients. So that means isolated psilocybin and isolated mescaline. So typically people talk about psilocybin, it's in the form of a mushroom, known generally as, let's say, magic mushrooms, or for mescaline, this would be peyote or San Pedro or Peruvian torch, one of these types of cacti. What we're doing is taking a very much a pharmaceutical approach to this. So this is production. In the case of psilocybin, these are genetically modified microorganisms producing at industrial scale in bioreactors. Expect some news on that. We have a very capable partner, one of the top biotechnology research organizations in Germany, working on that project. In Canada at the University of Alberta, at the Drug Development Center there, working on the synthesis of GMP mescaline. So these two programs really creating the foundation for what will be our psychedelic medicine program. And if you can just sort of visualize this, you've got sort of active pharmaceutical ingredient production as the foundation, then moving on to drug formulation. And we're certainly experts in that field. XPhyto acquired 100% of German-based Vector Pharma TF, world-renowned experts in thin film drug delivery, worked for major pharma, continue to work for major pharma on a contract basis. We own 100% of them. We have a number of programs, clinical programs underway. We have 4 human trials this year, one of Parkinson's medication and several others, MS, epilepsy, as well as a nausea medication. So we have both transdermal and sublingual oral dissolvable formulas. And back to psychedelics, with the foundation of the actual ingredient production, then going on to drug formulation, and then ultimately clinical validation. So lots of news to come, exciting work being done. And as I said, it's pretty exciting. It's been sort of in the shadow of some of our more high profile
naturally
operations. I mean, obviously the COVID testing is first and foremost. It's a product going to market, into revenue very soon. Also have a number of other trials, but the psychedelic program is very exciting. It's something that certainly, 3, 6, 12 months from now will be a major part of our story.
Lee, a lot of companies using psychedelics in their corporate presentations and mission statements because they want to try and ride the wave. We think psychedelics are going to go through a parabolic growth phase this decade.
Yep.
What, in layman's terms, because Hugh gave some good science there, but in layman's terms, what do you tell investors to make sure they understand, because clearly they are, how XPhyto is differentiated from most other players, because it's not just a tag name, it's real.
Yeah, look, seems like every small cap is trying to capture a psychedelic flavor of some sort.
Right.
As we know, Canada is great for that. You know, they open up the hornet's nest on a sector and allow it to thrive for the rest of the world to catch up, which I think is clearly happening at the moment. I mean, me personally, I can't sort of vouch for everyone else, but I like to look at the space from a pharmaceutical or a science standpoint. I understand that there's companies out there dealing with functional mushrooms and branding plays and all of the retail plays and whatnot. But I mean, I tend to look at, like I said, I like to look at it from a pharma or a science standpoint. Clearly, if you have a look at, you know, the institutions that the company may also be working with to fulfill their trials and their testing or whatever they're actually doing within the vertical itself, I think that's super important. You know, Hugh's spoken about, you know, the University of Alberta being one of those institutions that XPhyto has been fortunate enough to work with. I think, Hugh, the institutions in Germany is University of...
We have a number of relationships there. University, well, we actually haven't announced the partnership in this particular one, so I'll keep that under wraps.
Yeah, but I guess what I'm saying is, if you have a look at the presentation, like just on what, you know, the business has been able to do in like the cannabis space, for example. I mean, it was University of Munich, is that right?
Yeah, Technical University of Munich. We have several partnerships with them.
Yeah, so George, if you have a look at the caliber of institutions that XPhyto, you know, has been able to work with on past projects and hopefully obviously future ones, I mean, that's a really big validation, you know, thumbprint on the business. I like to look at that for sure. If you look at businesses like Cybin, obviously MindMed, clearly Compass, and I think it's, can't really say it properly, but I think it's Altai, Peter Thiel's company. You know, just have a look at the caliber of some of the institutions that they're working with for their projects, their research projects. They're, you know, top notch, world-class caliber. So I think that's a point. That's something.
Yeah, that's a third-party validation right there.
Yeah, on an industry that's clearly at the beginning of adoption. I mean, Hugh would be able to answer this better than me, but just from myself, from the outside looking in, I certainly see the psychedelics space being adopted a lot more quicker by pharma than, say, the cannabis space. If you just have a look at the amount of capital that's being deployed, and obviously now the pharmaceutical partnerships and institutions that are combining on these research projects, seems to have happened a lot quicker and with a lot more, I guess, openness to adoption than what we still experience with the cannabis space. So I think, you know, to me, it's all about validation and credibility in such an early stage. And so, well, we are at an early stage in a new vertical, and you know, XPhyto obviously ticks that box. But when I'm looking at others, I'd certainly, you know, look at that side of things as well.
Hugh, last question on that segment on the psychedelics. Drug formulations sometimes can take years, for example. Is that the case for psychedelics, where you might have to go through phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, and all these, or are you expecting to, if everything goes well, to come to market a little bit sooner than that?
Yeah, so let me speak generally about our drug formulation business. So when we acquired Vector Pharma, you know, the main value proposition that we saw there, it was primarily a platform technology. So Vector Pharma has a pipeline, you know, publicly of, let's say, you know, 4 products in trials currently. Now, those products are either generic or hybrid generic products, which means a shortcut to market. So in generic, it's basically the same active pharmaceutical ingredient and the same drug delivery method. An example would be our rotigotine transdermal patch, essentially a one-to-one generic version of soon to be off patent drug formula. Our CBD formula, for example, is a hybrid generic, where it's a generic active pharmaceutical ingredient being CBD, but delivered in a novel way. So this would be our oral dissolvable formula. When it comes to psychedelics, it's still, there's some discretion, obviously, in the hand, well, a lot of discretion in the hands of a regulator like Health Canada or the FDA, where we can insert ourselves along that pathway really depends on the specific trial and the application made in terms of what you're trying to accomplish. So our focus for mescaline, as an example, is addiction. Now, mescaline is kind of unique in the psychedelic world in that it is legal in certain practices in North America as part of the Native American church, for example. It's been used for, arguably thousands of years in certain spiritual ceremonies. There is a fair bit of data available around safety and dosage. When you come to the table with that kind of, let's say, application, information in hand, and at the same time, and Lee is actually part of this, partnering with, groups with, let's say, connection to the First Nations community, working with them to plan these trials, it's going to give us, we believe it will give us a significant, let's say, advanced standing when it comes to the application. So that rather than starting, some groups right now, and it's interesting, some groups are claiming to be in phase 2 and they're not. I mean, all of these trials are registered. You can see where people are if you look on the internet with the right authorities.
Georgecom Pharma, we're in phase 2. Yeah, we got this covered.
Yeah, basically. I mean, whereas really some of those groups should be starting in animal models and working their way up. So that's yet to be determined, but we're fairly confident in terms of the team we're putting together that we're going to be inserting at the most advanced point possible, for a company at our stage.
I mean, Hugh, George, you just got to look at, I won't mention tickers, but some of the bigger boys, which we know, they're only just getting past IND filing stage. And, these are businesses that have raised a couple of $100 million of capital, significant valuation sitting on, the NASDAQ and one about to be in the NASDAQ. And, as we know, just getting to being able to file an IND and get through that successfully takes, in some instances, can take years. So, you're right, Hugh. A lot of the businesses coming out there and saying that they're going to be entering phase 2 clinical trials in 2021. I guess that would be probably something else that I would err of caution is, to just do a little bit more work on exactly where they are in the biotech pipeline in real time.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. And that's something that XPhyto is really focused on. So when we look for opportunities for product development, we're looking for accelerated pathways. So when it came to our diagnostic business, we've gone from invention to commercialization in 8 months for that product. For our rapid point of care COVID test. Yeah, for our drug formulation business, our transdermal patch, for example, rotigotine based, that's, a start to finish in sort of 2 years. That's unheard of in the drug development business. The hybrid generic products a little bit longer, but still, we're talking 3 years versus 10 years. And we'd like to take that same approach to the psychedelic business. So wherever we can, we'd like to, best foot forward and I'm not going to say shortcut, but, take advantage of every opportunity that's presented to us to get products to market as quickly as possible.
Hugh, last word to you. Look, like I said, like the way I start out this webcast, if any company had one of these divisions, they'd be ecstatic. You've got 3. Give for the benefit of shareholders, how do you rank in terms of your personal satisfaction where the company is positioned today relative to where you thought? So naturally, when you've got 3 divisions like this, you're planning way ahead. So here we are in, almost the middle of Q2. How happy are you with the company's progress and where it's at? Stronger than expected, as expected, weaker than expected?
Well, I think, about well, let's say January of this year, we put out some guidance in terms of our strategy for the year. We're very pleased with where we are. We're on target in terms of our diagnostics. We're also on schedule in terms of our drug formulation business. So very happy there, as well as psychedelics. In fact, we're ahead of schedule. News coming on all those fronts. I think what we see, we're a bioscience accelerator. So we look at these opportunities. We're in very early, develop the business, and our diagnostics business is now, I mean, it's moved so quickly. As we transition into revenue, we are right now building an independent team at XP Diagnostics. So that business will soon be standalone. So look for, some sort of monetization spin-out opportunity this year, and obviously designed to benefit our shareholders. So, I think that will be the first business to spin out. And you can see as these others develop, the drug formulation, the psychedelics, we're looking at a number of other opportunities to add to the pipeline. As standalone businesses, they take time, they take some investment, we build them up. But they're certainly, they're growing. They're growing in a way that we couldn't possibly have hoped that it would go this well. So
that's great to hear. That's great to hear, Hugh. Congratulations. Congratulations on that. Gents, thanks so much for joining us. Amazing conversation. This time flew by because we could talk about XPhyto for a couple of hours if we want to. And I bet you a lot of people would love to listen, but let's save some of the thunder for what appears to be, from the sounds of it, you guys are going to have a pretty nice, cute, summer anyway. Sounds like there's more developments coming. You guys are going to be back on a lot. So thanks for joining us, especially you, Hugh. You're the tip of the spear. You're the chairman, CEO. So congratulations on leading Lee and the whole team and to where you guys are today.
Thanks so much, George. Pleasure to be here.
For everybody at home, you've been watching or you've been listening by podcast on Spotify, Google, Apple, your favorite podcast platform. To Hugh Rogers, chairman, CEO, Lee Hugh, strategic advisor to XPhyto Therapeutics, trades on the CSE under XPHY, and for our friends in the US under XPHYF, and for our friends in Europe on Frankfurt 4XT. Time for you to do your due diligence. If you're new to the story, the way to do that is get to Agoracom, take a look at the profile page for XPhyto, because we've got the 30,000 foot level of view for you, because we know there's a lot going on. Once you've absorbed that, you feel comfortable with the company, what it does, then head over to the company's website. You can see it right above Hugh there, xphyto.com, to do your deep dive due diligence. Look, 3 operating divisions, they're all hitting on all cylinders, and there's more to come. I mean, it's on you to do the due diligence. Just don't say we didn't tell you so. Have a great day. See you next time.